There we go. Okay, and we are on class number 14, which is really amazing. We're gonna finish up this section now. Let's just give a quick review of the section we talked about. Again, in the beginning of Mishlei, we talked about what the purpose of the book was. Then we said, Shema b'ni Mosar Avicha, keep yourself connected to your past. Then in Pasuk Tes, this is not up on the screen. Then in Pasuk Tes, we said in verse 9, we said, Ki livyas cheinhem, because this is a adornment of grace for your head and chains for your neck. In other words, you want to make yourself beautiful, stick with your traditions. Don't change your traditions, don't reshape them. Stick with your traditions, and that is, in fact, that is beauty. Okay, I'll change the view here, speaker view. We're good. And then mute all. Okay, so stay with the past. The past is beautiful. Then Mishlei says as follows. Then Mishlei launches into a bit of a diatribe. And what he says is that be very careful, because since it is so precious, specifically because it's so precious and so special, and staying with your past is so important, and your tradition, where you come from, is so critical, you have to worry. Bini, we spoke many times, Bini, feel good about yourself, because even that if they go after you, and they will go after you, by definition, when you're holding on to something precious, there will be challenges to that. So then, al tovei, don't give into it. Don't be enticed. Don't give consent. We're going to talk about consent in a few minutes. If they say to you, let's wait an ambush for bloodshed, let's look for an innocent one without cause, which is just a representative of the kind of evil that you are being enticed to get involved in. And you have to recognize that even though it doesn't feel like such evil, saying a little gossip about a person, what's the big deal? It's not really a big deal. It's a big deal. It's akin to murder. It's akin to robbery. It's akin to thievery. We have to understand that if the Torah tells us not to behave in a certain way, not to live a certain way, that those are huge things. They're not small infractions. They're not just small crimes that we do. Nivla'im kishol chayim, and they will entice you to, like the grave, swallow them alive. Usemimim ki yardevor, while they are whole, like those descending to the pit. Kol hon yakar nimtza, we're going to find all precious wealth. Nimali batenu shalo, we're going to fill ourselves with great booty, meaning it's going to be very, very much to our benefit. We're going to make a lot off of this. It's going to be very, very beneficial to us. Your lot is going to be cast with us. Kis echad yiyelu, we're going to pull it all together. We're all going to benefit greatly from this. If this is the stuff you're hearing, that it's only going to be good for you, that this is going to be better for your life, all the things you ever dreamed about in your life are going to be enhanced if you just take this turn with us. Beni, have more self-respect than that. Al telech b'derech itam. We're going to accentuate this many, many times. Who's the itam that we're talking about? With them, it's you. Who is the Yetzer Hara? The Yetzer Hara is not some little thing sitting outside of you. The Yetzer Hara is the evil inclination, the thing that drives us to do things wrong, the thing that drives us to get angry, the thing that drives us to have bad midos, to have bad characteristics. That is internal. It's coming from inside of us. So, b'ni al telech b'derech itam, don't go on the way with them. Mina raglecha minisivasam, don't even get on the pathway with them. Ki ragleim lo ra yerutzu, because they run into evil. V'yimaru lishpach dam, and they're going to quickly spill blood. And that blood that's going to be spilled on the street is not somebody else's. It is ours. It is yours. Pasuk Yud Zayin, verse 17. I think it's the second chat. Sekichinam mizora harashas, because the net spreads out with free bait, which we'll talk about again in a minute. Be'ene kol ba'al konaf, in the eyes of every winged creature. Ve'heim l'domam ya'arovu, and they are waiting in ambush for the blood. Yitzpenu linafshosam, and they are lurking for their souls. Kain archos kol botzea botza, because this is the ways of all the spoilers. Es nefesh ba'olav yikach, they take the souls of the owners of the wealth. Yesterday we talked about the concept. Why would anybody take the responsibility of enticing anybody? And we said, because in essence, your existence makes me uncomfortable. When you're, the goody two shoes in a class, we always hated the goody two shoes. It wasn't because the goody two shoes was like, siding up to the teacher all the time. It's because the goody two shoes reminded us that we were not goody two shoes. The goody two shoes in the class, the person who was always with the teacher, but teacher, didn't you say that we're supposed to do this? And everybody would roll their eyes at that person. I hate that person because that person was a condemnation. That person was an absolute condemnation of what I'm supposed to be doing and what I've chosen not to do. That's what we talked about yesterday about Gerim, about converts. The converts are like a sapachas to us. They're like a disease to us because they're a condemnation to us. Whenever you see a person that's acting so precisely and so religiously, so then it's a condemnation. It bothers us. And it makes us recognize our own shortcomings. So I shoot down your success. And when I shoot down your success, I feel better. If I could take Aaron and I can make Aaron into a small person, talking about Aaron a Kohen, and I could say, yeah, but he built the golden calf. So then the other message of Aaron, which is Ohev Shalom v'Rodev Shalom, loving peace and pursuing peace, that's not so compelling to me because he was a flawed human being. And as long as I could see him as a flawed human being, he has little to say to me. How often when somebody gives us musar, do we try to run the person down? I'll tell you, it happened to me this morning. I can't tell you the story, but it happened to me this morning. I was given musar in a way that I felt was not acceptable. I believe that the person was trying to figure out a way to do it that wasn't going to embarrass me so much. But at the end of the day, I think that it was embarrassing. It took me, Baruch Hashem, it didn't take me, I did have to go through the exercise, but it wasn't a long exercise because I remember yesterday's class and 5 days ago's class and 10 days ago's class. And it's stuck in my head. The person gave me musar. I easily wanted to shoot the person down. I wanted to say how disgusting it was. But then I realized, wait a second. At the end of the day, I was doing something wrong. So it doesn't make a difference whether that person did it right or didn't do it right. I got the message. I fixed what I was doing and everything is good. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And you have to go through that. You have to go through that exercise. But most of the time what we do is we shoot the other person down. We say that they're useless, they're worthless, they're nothing, they're not important. And they're flawed human beings also. And therefore I can soften the blow. I don't even need to listen to what they said to me. That's the first thing that we need to know when people are trying to entice us, that we have to recognize, why would anybody want to entice another person? Because you are a condemnation. Because when they see your goodness and they see what you do that's good, you have to recognize. So don't be fooled into thinking, I'm so good, I don't have to worry about any kind of temptation. We always have to worry about temptation because temptation lurks, dafka because we're so good, dafka because we've accomplished so much, because we have reached such a high level. That's why it's there in the background always, because at the end of the day, we are somebody's bane of existence. Another thing that we have to understand that comes out of this section is that never let your guard down. Al ta'amin ba'atzmacha, don't trust yourself ad yom moscha, until the day you die. Shlomo Hamelech is talking to intelligent people. He's saying, B'ni, he's building us up. He's telling us we're really something. We're banim atem l'Hashem Elokechem. We're God's children. We're royalty. And we're touched by that because otherwise Shlomo Hamelech wouldn't have used that language. So he knew that language was going to resonate with us. It was going to mean something to us. So we're not talking about small people. We're not talking about people that are insignificant people. And yet Shlomo Hamelech says, don't go with them. Lo sove, don't desire al tove, don't be drawn along with them, which means that we have the possibility of being drawn along with them, because we have to recognize that the minute that we let our guard down, we are susceptible. We've spoken about before a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, 80 some odd years he was the high priest. Can you imagine that? 80 some odd years he had private conversations with God. Private conversation with God on Yom Kippur. He was the only one allowed into the Holy of Holies. And he sat there and had a conversation with God. He was the holiest of all Jews, 80 years. And then at the end of his career, he became an apostate. You know what an apostate means? God doesn't exist. Torah doesn't exist. There's no such thing as Shekhinah. There's no such thing as Jewish people. There's no such thing as Geula, as redemption. There's no such... Really? You were living your life for that for 80 years? Because al ta'amin ba'atzmacha ad yom meischa. Don't trust in yourself until the day you die. Because you have to be vigilant and careful and protect what's valuable. Yom Kippur afternoon, you fasted an entire Yom Kippur, you're down to the last 3 hours. You daven a mincha, and we take out a Torah reading for the mincha. So in the morning, the Torah reading that we read is all about the Kohen Gadol and all about the service, the avodah that he did in the temple. But in the afternoon, what are we going to read now? So what we read in the afternoon is the Parsha, the section of the Torah that talks about prohibited marriages. And amongst those prohibited marriages, it says, don't marry your mom. You can't have sexual relations with your mom. You can't have sexual relations with your sister. Now, if I had to choose a day of the year where I thought I wasn't so necessary for me to warn you about that, I would say it's probably Yom Kippur afternoon, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I got to assume the last thing on your mind is having sexual relations with your mother. I got to assume. Never know, but I got to assume. And yet the Torah thought that was important to let you know that, by the way, I want you to know how holy you have to be. You have to stay away from your ma. Come on. Yom Kippur afternoon, any dead? I don't need to hear that. Read me the section of the Torah that tells me how much God loves me. Read me the section of the Torah that says that I am God's children. God thinks that I'm amazing. Read me that stuff. Don't read me the section of the Torah that says don't go down to the gutter. Don't be a lowlife. Don't be a filthy human being. Really? Yeah, because we have to recognize that we could drop down there at any second. That just because right now we're holding in the holiest place, we're whiter than our kittles. We are right now as pure as the day that we were born. I mean, it's unbelievable where we are, but you're not going to stay there unless you're careful, unless you're protecting what's precious. It's possible for a person to go mebika arim. We mentioned this at the very end of yesterday, from igro rama lebiko amikta, from the upper heights to the lowest of the lows. You understand that we stood there at the foot of Mount Sinai? We said Nasev and Nishma. We were the closest that you could possibly be to seeing God. We saw revelation. We didn't just hear the 10 Commandments. We saw God delivering the 10 Commandments. We got a vision, a glimpse of God that in no generation did they get a glimpse like that. 40 days later, we're dancing around the golden calf, pointing to it, saying, Eila Elokecha Yisrael, those are your gods, Israel. How does that happen? How do you go from the upper heights to the lowest of lows in just a second? See, normally it doesn't work that way. Like I mentioned yesterday, normally it works that we go step by step by step by step. It's a slow progression. We stop becoming careful with mitzvah X, and then we stop becoming careful with mitzvah Y. And then that goes and bleeds into Z and A and B. And then all of a sudden, we look back and we say, wow, a year ago, I was in such a different place. Last Rosh Hashanah, I was in such a better place, and I just can't believe how far I've sunk. But you never noticed that you were sinking because you were going incrementally, tiny little steps. That's the way we normally collapse. So how did this happen? Because when you're not careful, you can get sideswiped and you don't even recognize what's happening. When we're not vigilant and we're not careful, is the only way that a person can protect themselves from falling down is by being careful, watchful, mindful, and really ultimately being deaf to everything going on around them. You know, when they went to bury Yaakov, they go to Maras Machpelah. And who's waiting for them outside of Maras Machpelah? Who was on guard duty at Maras Machpelah, the cave of the patriarchs? Esau. Esau was standing there, and he sees his nephews, all of his nephews. Said, "Oh, mishpacha, whoa, guys, nice to see you. Shalom aleichem. How's the mishpacha doing?" And they told him, "You see what's in the middle here? It's your father. We came to bury him." Esav says, "Oh, why are you burying him here? There's a medrash. Why are you burying him here?" Esav says, and they say to Esav, because dad, Zayda, the Elta Zayda, he bought it. Remember Avraham Avinu? The guy who you eating soup on the day he died, right? When everybody else was sitting shiva, you were drinking red soup. You remember that guy? Well, he bought it. It's ours. Belongs to the mishpacha. Oh, no, he says, so if it doesn't belong to your half of the mishpacha, it's mine. So what are you talking about? We have the deed sitting back in Mitzrayim. Go get it. No, we can't get the deed. It's too far of a way to go. Well, I'm sorry, but unless you have the paperwork, we can't fill your request. That was the moment that bureaucracy was born. Yeah, he says to him, I'm sorry, unless you can show me the paperwork, we can't bury him here. So they figured out who was the fastest guy, who had the fastest connection, get an email from back there. So they sent Naphtali. Meantime, Dun, one of the sons of Yaakov, had a son, and his name was Chushim. The word Chushim means that he was deaf, couldn't hear. Chushim ben Dun is standing and he's watching all of this stuff happen. Now he's deaf. He doesn't hear anything. He has no idea about this conversation. He doesn't know what's going on. He turns to one of his cousins and he says, "What's going on here?" Esav's having a little problem with us burying Zayda. They must have done sign language to him. Chushim said, "What? The Zayda is rotting in the sun, and we're sending somebody back to go and to prove it to this schnook that this is our burial place?" He pulls out his sword, he walks over to Esav, and he lobs off his head. According to the Medrash, the head of Esav rolls into Maras Machpelah. And when you list the people that are buried in Maras Machpelah in the cave of the patriarch, you have to list Adam and Eve, Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah, and Esav's head. Now, there's a whole family there. This is a large mishpacha. It's a couple hundred people. And nobody stood up to Esav, because everybody else allowed themselves to get used to what they were hearing. It went in and it landed. They assimilated it. They internalized it. They got used to it. And then when he said his next thing, Esav, it wasn't so bad anymore. Chushim couldn't hear anything. He couldn't get used to anything. He was totally deaf. And all he knew was what he saw, and what he saw was wrong. He couldn't listen to the words that were going to entice him, that were going to drag him on to say, this is normal. To Chushim, this was absolute abnormality. That's the way we have to be when it comes to the enticements. When it comes to those things that are trying to pull us, we have to be deaf to them. We have to be watchful, mindful, and deaf of them. Because if not, we're going to get drawn into them. Even if we don't make it on the derech, on the path, we don't turn completely. But even if we walk on the shvil, even if we walk on the dirt road, on the tributary, we still run the risk. Even if we're not committing the aveira itself, the transgression itself, but the tolerance of it is going to already have an effect on us. And that's what Shlomo Hamelech uses, the difference between derech and shvil, between pathway and the little bit between road and pathway. That even if we get just on the pathway, even if we just accept it, we live in a world that teaches us, no, you have to be tolerant. And that's Jewishly nonsense. We have to be patient and we have to be kind, but not tolerant. Because tolerant means that I accept, on some level, I accept something that is wrong. And I can't accept something that's wrong. I can be patient with it. I can wait until you change it. But to be tolerant of it is, I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay. We're not all okay. Not every ideology of a Jew is a Jewish ideology. Not everything that a Jew says and does becomes another Jewish pathway. No, it's not. Now, do I need to treat you like a mensch? Oh, baby, I need to treat you like a mensch. Doesn't make a difference what kind of shtick you're into. It doesn't make a difference what kind of stuff you're doing. I got to treat you like a mensch. But that's not tolerance. Not the way the world uses it. That's called Jewish tolerance, which is really just another word for patience. The Yetzer Hara's goal is not the pleasure that it gets from doing the thing wrong, but it's from the dirt that it causes, from the effect that it causes. The fact that you do an avera, okay, you do an avera, but the real yield, the real goal of the Yetzer Hara, the real goal of that part of you that is drawn towards negative things, is that every time you get involved in it, you move further and further away. Shlomo Hamelech wants us to understand very clearly that the goal of Torah is the nefesh ba'alov yikach, the last words in this section, that he wants to take our soul. Because once our soul is committed to him, the actions are just a matter of time. But the actions aren't the goal. It's the soul that's the goal. You know, during the period of time when they were looking for Jews to convert to Catholicism, and that it was a crime punishable by death, the yield was, you know, many people externally kept Catholicism. Externally, they went to church. They wore crosses. They dressed like Catholics. They professed Catholicism, but they weren't ruined yet. They only became ruined when it started to go inside, when it started to touch their soul. Because when it touches the soul, the actions aren't what changes us. It's the soul, and the decisions that the soul make is what destroys us. Shlomo Hamelech wants us to understand that when we hang around with these kinds of things, they have an effect on us. When we hang around, when we tolerate, we accept, we say, you know, it's another ideology. It's not mine, but it's another valid ideology. That is when the effect on the soul begins. If you look at the book called Mesilas Yesharim, The Path of the Just, the first chapter of Mesilas Yesharim, or the first trait that it talks about, is the trait of being watchful, of being mindful, being present, being careful, being aware of what you're getting involved in. Because that's the first step both to disintegration and also to greatness. That if we want to achieve greatness, then we have to be careful and precise and aware of the things that we're involved in and the things that are going on around us. This is Shlomo Hamelech's, again, really introduction. It's his first salvo. This is what he thinks is the most important thing that we need to know. That we need to always protect what's precious. And if Torah is precious, and Torah living is precious, and the midos tovos of the Torah, the good, beautiful character traits that we're meant to develop through the Torah are precious, then they need to be protected. And to protect them, we have to build strong fences around ourselves and never even get engaged and involved on the road, on the pathway, on the small shvil. Staying away from it, being deaf to it, at the end of the day, is the only way that we can ultimately protect ourselves. Okay, beautiful. Tomorrow
Rabbi,
is... Yes.
Before we leave, I wanted to mention the loss of Louis Katz, because Rita's been a really good member of our group here.
Absolutely.
She comes regularly, and as does Louis, or as did Louis for some time. So I wanted to mention that loss to everyone in the group.
Right. His funeral was last night, and the shiva, they're sitting shiva. I think there's specific times, but they're sitting shiva in their house in Dimri.
Okay.
Rita reminded me this morning that I needed to get out of there so that I can go give class. So that I gave her an excused absence, but she'll return. Okay. So tomorrow's.
Rabbi,
I'm sorry.
Can we just talk about tradition for a minute?
Yes.
Two things. First one, I believe most Jews have little or no Jewish traditions.
Correct.
So here we're talking about tradition. Most Jews don't have them, or they're weak.
Correct.
And on the other hand, there's just an example I had years ago. It was with a shiur at a shul. We're talking about talit or tefillin. I don't remember exactly what they're talking about. And one guy raised his hand saying, "That's not the way my father did it." The rabbi said, "Perhaps that's not what your father did, but he didn't know better, or he was mistaken, or whatever. And this is the right way to do it." And the guy said, "No way. My father didn't do it like that, so I'm not going to do it like that," meaning the right way. So tradition seems clear, but it's a very fuzzy term in terms of who's got it, who doesn't have it, how weak it is, right. or if we receive the bad tradition, what do we do with that bad one? So it's not simple.
Oh, not simple. So you've opened up a great can of worms, but I love it, and I'm gonna give you a very quick answer. The the first, I'll give you three answers. The first is that Shlomo Hamelech is talking to people that have clear, defined traditions. That's one. But I don't even need to go there. That's just like the easy answer. But the other is that when you see a person that has a tradition, even if that tradition is mistaken, the way you extricate that person from that mistaken tradition has to be so careful, because that person is doing all the right things. They're living with tradition. Now, somewhere along the line, they either made it up or forgot it, or they were watching their father, and their father would make kiddush holding the cup in a certain way, only because he had a blister on his other hand, and that's why he couldn't hold it that way. But the child didn't know that, and that's why I'm being glib. But you follow what I'm saying? Traditions are born out of crazy things. But you're watching. You have a tradition. You have a Masorah. Isn't that gorgeous? So when you extricate a person from there, it has to be done so carefully and precisely, because the person is actually doing everything we're talking about. They're living with tradition. Now, the third thing I'll tell you is that tradition and halacha can't be separated from each other. So when we say living with tradition, what we really mean is living in a halachic way. A person who drives on Shabbos because their parents drove on Shabbos is also living with tradition. I'll tell you a beautiful story. There was a family that came in. There was a big tzaddik living in Yerushalayim. His name was Rabbi Tzendrit. And he happened to have been involved with Bali Tshuva. It was like amazing. He was the exact person, when you would look at him on the street, you would say, that guy for sure has nothing to do, never made a person in his life religious. He was a teacher of Torah. He was a firebrand, and he turned on many people to Torah. Couple came in, a mother and father, Sephardic mother and father, they came into this marriage. They asked, who was Rabbi Tzendrit? They pointed him out. They started to scream at him. So what a chutzpah, what you've done to our family. You've turned it upside down. Our kids don't talk to us anymore. They don't want to come. Our kids don't want to come and eat in our house. You've just made it so stressful inside of our house. What have you done by making our kids religious? They've rebelled against everything we taught them. So Rabbi Tzendrit looked at them and said, excuse me, if I may, you're actually amazing parents. And you taught your children amazing. They learned everything they know from you. So what are you talking about? We weren't religious. Said, and look at our kids. Our kids are religious. How could they learn it from us? We hate religion. So someone said, tell me about your father. Also, the lady says, Abba Shali wa tzaddik. He was a righteous person. He put on tefillin every day. He said tefillin. And what about your mother? Mashali. She was such a tzaddik. She did chesed. She said tefillin all day long. If she wasn't cooking, she was saying tefillin. So if someone looked at them and says, and what about you? No, for us, we decided we needed a different path. I said, that's exactly what you taught to your kids. Your kids looked at you and you said, they saw you living a certain way, and they said to themselves, you know what, we need a different path. You taught your children how to be independent, how to be big thinkers. That's a beautiful thing. Don't blame anybody for that. Take credit for it. You gave your kids the strength to be able to decide what was good for them and what was right for them. You made that decision, and you gave that ability to your children to make that decision also. So when we talk about following tradition, it's really down to the very depths of what that is. In other words, that really what we're talking about following is following this idea of having the strength to stand for what you believe in. Okay, we'll deal with this more. It's not going to be the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, tomorrow's Parsha, and next week I'm going to be taking vacation for a week, so we're not going to have class next week. But don't worry about that. Tomorrow, we're regular class tomorrow, and I'll make the announcement again tomorrow. And Baruch Hashem, these are the times when I enjoy being on the other side of the screen, because you can't throw anything at me. So I'm protected. I know that nobody likes to take a break from class. Baruch Hashem, beautiful thing. But it's unlike teaching teenagers in school. When you tell them you're not going to be there tomorrow, then it's mamish. Yeah, it's mamish like yotif. That's it. Ms. Warshef, you know that very well. Right? It becomes like a holiday. But
that's a bonus for me, because God willing, our children are coming from the States, and they will be with us for a week. And I was just thinking, how am I going to deal with this? Because my computer is set up in the room where the boys are sleeping, and so it works out well.
Amazing. I took the stress off you. Yeah, we have our kids visiting from the States also. One of our kids, I know, is married, so she's here with her husband. So next week we'll go away a little bit.
Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Okay, but tomorrow
Yes,
we're on for tomorrow.
Okay.
Parsha Sekev tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Have a beautiful, wonderful, amazing, awesome day.
Thank you. Have a great day,
You as
everyone.
well.
Bye.
You too.
Oh, too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.